Hi, my name is Judy. I'm a grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of the Al-Anon Family Groups, which includes ALANON. She's lucky she's only known me for a few hours. It can get worse. Congratulations to Waterloo for having your anniversary. I'll tell you in a minute why I think it's special to me already. But I do have a home group in Reno, Nevada. My home group is Thursday night, 7 o'clock, Love and Laughter. We meet on Mount Rose Highway, so if you're traveling through, I have a meeting card. My home group makes a little card of numbers, and so if you think you're coming our way, I'll give you my card and you can call. It would be great to have you there. Well, a lot of thanks go out. Before I forget, thanks for this flower. It's a very special flower because it was brought to me at lunch. We put it in the refrigerator and promptly left it there. And then there were several people. You know, in Al-Anon, we all get together and we get it done. And so the flower is here after all, but no thanks to me. Thank you to Jane for inviting me. She sent long and detailed notes about everything that was happening. The committee for dinner tonight, for the little thank you basket that was at the hotel. All those little touches that just make Al-Anon and the Fellowship of AA really special. I'm sorry I wasn't here yet when Jack spoke last night, but I'll catch his CD, and I know that you'll enjoy Larry. I've heard Larry's story before, and Bonnie today talked about the history. 38 years, the anniversaries in Al-Anon. And the luncheon theme today was, how important is it? Meaning, how important is Al-Anon? And Jane asked me about that, and she said, would you weave that into your talk if you can? And I thought about it a lot. How important is Al-Anon? For me, I felt like it was a matter really of life and death. And today it's a matter of life. And I was listening to the traditions, and when she said there are no dues or fees, and what came to my mind was, yes, but a pound of flesh. It was a rugged journey. And the reason that I think Al-Anon Waterloo anniversaries are special, I started my Al-Anon journey in Cedar Rapids. I lived there for 12 years, and that's where I came in the door of Al-Anon. And I came up to this anniversary several times. I rode along. And I don't remember if it was in this room or not, but it felt kind of the same, and I'm sure I remembered the popcorn. And what was really interesting about my one visit here, I was asked to speak, and I think that might have been 20 years ago. I was a real newcomer, and it was one of the first times I had ever gone to an event like this, and I didn't know anybody. I was by myself, and on Sunday, no, it must have been Saturday morning, I think. I was in the hotel, and I was learning about be good to yourself. And I looked at the menu, and I was hungry for breakfast, and I didn't want to go somewhere and eat, so I thought, I will order room service. This is part of my new recovery plan. And so I did order room service. And I ate my breakfast, and I was just feeling like Betty Grable, you know, stretched out, and I was eating in my underwear, and I remember I had my butterfly necklace on, and when I was done, I thought, what am I going to do with the tray? And I read on the bottom of the menu, it said, put the tray out by the door so that someone can pick it up. And so I'm a good follow direction person, and I went to the door, and I could see we were in kind of an alcove, and I thought, if I put it right here, no one will ever see it. So I better lean out a little further and put it out there. And when I did that, I was trying to hold the door with my rear end, and I stretched too far, and the door closed behind me. And I was standing, I think it was a Holiday Inn, downtown Waterloo, in my underwear in the morning. Now, fortunately, I had talked to the ALANON speaker, and we'd had this idle conversation. She said, what's your room? And I told her, and she told me hers, and I remembered hers. There's a little saying in our ODAP book about Al-Anon members have the memory of an elephant. We never forget a thing. We may need it for future reference. And so I thought, okay, I've got to go to her room. And I started to the right, and then it was the wrong sequence of numbers. So I'm out there and I'm looking like duck and cover, and then I went the other way and I found her room and I knocked on the door, but I didn't want to stand in front of that little peephole because I was in my underwear, and I thought, well, she won't let me in. So I was standing aside knocking, and eventually they did let me in, and I called, and she says, like, what are you doing looking like that? And I said, well, it's a long, short story. And the desk clerk said, oh, come down and get the key, when I told him that I was locked out. And I said, I prefer not to. And so they came up and let me in, and for many years, that was a funny memory of my trip to Waterloo. And things were not good at home at the time. And I remember somebody asking me, are you kind of worried about going home? And I said, no, I'm going to be laughing all the way. Who would think that I went to Waterloo and I'm frolicking around in the Holiday Inn in my underwear? Life is getting better. So that's what I recall. And I know that you have had wonderful events since, and I remember some people that I have met here. I was thinking today of one of your longtime members, Audrey S., and how she was encouraging about service and becoming involved in giving back what has been given to you. So some of the longtime members are gone, but it's up to us to keep the legacy going. And I kind of find it hard to believe that it's been as long as it's been since I've been here, but I am happy to be here. Thanks to Al-Anon today, I'm an ordinary person living a really extraordinary life, I would say. When I walked into Al-Anon, I had read in the newspaper that there were meetings. If you were concerned about someone's drinking, it said, call this number. Every Sunday, the last Sunday of the month in the Cedar Rapids paper was that list of meetings. And I read it every last Sunday. And I thought, that sounds good. And it took me a long time to call. But I did call, and I was told by the person I spoke with on the answering service, come to my house, she said, and we'll drive to the meeting together. And I drove to her house. I met her there. I knocked on the door. I turned around to leave, and my car was not in the driveway. And right away I was going to blame somebody, except I drove it there. And I was so nervous that I had put my car in neutral, left it in neutral, and it had rolled across the street. It was sitting over on the lawn, practically, of somebody's place, and that was all right. Our cars were used to parking in peculiar situations, so I just went and got my car, and off we went to the meeting. And it was down in the basement, and Bonnie talked about her first meeting today. Mine felt the same. It felt like I was in a dungeon. We were in a small room. There was a light hanging from a cord, it seemed, and I sat by the oven. It was the kitchen. And in the other room, there was a whole lot of light, it appeared to me, and a whole lot of laughter. And I wondered who was over there. And I have since learned who is over there. And I'm glad that there was a lot of laughter and a lot of light. But I was thinking, I'd rather be over there. It sounds like it's more fun. And it was sort of a dismal meeting. I think there was a couple there, parents that night, I remember, and they were sad about their child. And the child was going off somewhere, and it sounded to me like that person was going to be locked up, like it was maybe prison or something. And I just remember thinking, boy, it's not that bad at my house. I mean, we don't have to lock them up. And I just couldn't wait to get out of there. They gave me the One Day at a Time book and some pamphlets, and I was gone. I went home, though, and I announced that I had been to Al-Anon, and in my prim way, I have been to Al-Anon. And we don't give advice in Al-Anon, but I wouldn't recommend that you do that if that's your first meeting and you come home and make the announcement. It just didn't go over well at my house. So I was newly married, and I was not interested in rocking the boat. I really wanted to please my spouse. I loved him, I cared for him, and I certainly didn't want him to be upset with what I did. And so I said, it's not that bad. Is that a liver transplant again? I thought that was a great line, Jack. In those 4 years before I went back, I exhibited all the traits of that family member that was affected by the disease of alcoholism. I had 2 big obsessions, and they were his time and our money. Where was he? What was he doing with all of his time, and where was all of our money? We were 2 adults working full-time. We had decent salaries. We never had enough, and we were always short. We lived in the country. We lived out on Lynn-Benton County line, and we burned wood. My husband and some of his friends would get up wood in the fall, and I worried about fire because wood was always gathered at the last minute. And you know, if wood doesn't season, it's green and you can have a chimney fire, and we did. We had about everything, you know, that you could imagine would happen. It happened. I worried about car wrecks. I worried about loss of job, etc. And I was really resentful and frustrated with his friends because he had some. I think that was the difference. I really didn't have anybody. I went to work and I complained, and people saw me coming and they went the other way. But he had friends, and they would come out on Saturday morning and do projects in the garage. And, you know, they were good projects. They were talented and creative, and, you know, if they wounded themselves, they'd strap themselves together with duct tape and keep on going. And by the time I went back to Al-Anon in April of 1985, I had a car with headlights that hadn't worked in over a year. I wasn't combing my hair in the back. I didn't have many clothes. And when I did get to the meeting, and I remember mentioning about my headlights, somebody said, well, how long has it been since they haven't worked? I said, oh, I don't know, a year, I suppose. Or, you know, they're kind of looking at me like, well, that's kind of odd. And I said, well, I just go home by dark. To me, that seemed real sensible. I didn't have to get them fixed. I just got in before the sun went down. And somebody said, you know, like, keep coming back, like they say to people. And I got my headlights fixed. That's probably one of the first things in recovery that I did. You see, I was waiting for somebody else to fix it, just like change the oil and do other things. And I was waiting because things never happened. Now, when I went into the meeting, I chose a different path. I went to my boss and I asked if I could get out of work during the day so that I could go to a noontime meeting and then get back to my job and then go home, and so no one at home would know that I was going to Al-Anon. And that was humbling to me. I had to go in and say, we have a problem at home, and I'm desperate, and I need to do this. And he said, absolutely, we'll rearrange your schedule, don't worry. And that was a great gift to me. I was able to run out of work, run downtown Cedar Rapids, go to the meeting and get back. And I don't think I revealed that I was going anywhere for over a year. I think what I found there was comfort. It was a safe haven. For just an hour, I listened to you as best I could, although my mind was racing. But I wasn't worried about what would happen. I just had to be there. And on the table were all the pamphlets, our conference-approved literature. And there were titles there like So You Love an Alcoholic, and a guide for the family of the alcoholic. I just couldn't wait to get my hands on those things, to read about what I could do. There was one, what do you do about the alcoholics drinking? I couldn't wait to see what was in there because I knew what I had done. And I remember reading that pamphlet, and it listed all the things I'd done, and then at the end it said, well, they don't work. That's futile. Give up those things. And so it described me perfectly. The little leaflet of the 20 questions, similar to what AA has. The first one was, I think, do you worry about how much someone drinks? And my answer was yes. And then, do you cover up about what happens or things in your home? And I said, yes. And do you have money problems? And I said, yes. And on the first 3 answers, I knew that I was a worried, broke liar. I mean, that was established right away, and then the rest of them, it just went downhill. There were only 2 that I didn't answer yes to out of those 20. And one was something about, do you want to harm yourself to call attention to the problem? And I didn't really want to do that, but I did want to be dead. I would think about putting my car in front of the grain truck on Highway 30, but I was a coward, and I thought I'd just get maimed, and then who would cook? You know, I'd have these thoughts, and so that wasn't it. And there was one about the law. Have you ever called the law or something? And I hadn't really had to do that because they had dropped by on occasion. And I had seen them on our road. So, you know, I didn't have to do that. But that little piece helped me identify that even though I didn't want to be there, I was really in the right place. And I remember looking for the heads of people that were familiar. And mostly it was the top of their heads, and some of the heads were gray, but they were people who kept coming back every week. And they were the old-timers, the people that seemed to have the answers to me. I also got a quick education that alcoholism was a disease. And we have a little pamphlet about that, and it said in 1957, the American Medical Association declared that alcoholism was a disease that could be arrested but never cured. And when I read that, I thought, if it's good enough for the AMA to say that, it's good enough for me. I'm taking that definition. The problem is you can take it on a day, but it's hard to remember it long term. Because when somebody comes home and appears to be acting out, it was difficult for me to say, oh, he's ill. You know, instead I said something that was less sweet. And so I had to learn to change my behavior. I also loved it because some of the pamphlets told me what I should stop doing and what I should start doing. And I had been doing all the wrong things. So it gave me a plan of action. Today when people come to the meetings and they're newcomers and people say, oh, just keep coming back. But I don't know if you're like me, you're looking for some answers. And so today when a newcomer comes, they're always looking like, what do I do? What do I do? You know, here I am, and you guys didn't seem that earth-shaking. You know, you're all sitting around looking serene and nodding, and, you know, we want the specifics. But our literature tells us what not to do. Stop nagging. Stop checking up. Stop pouring out bottles. Do this. Don't do that. And, you know, it was hard to stop doing all those things. I had to learn how to behave in a whole new way. Al-Anon is kind of like charm school in a way. You know, I was used to nagging and complaining and manipulating and bartering and scolding, and you name it, I was used to it. So I had to have a plan of action that helped me be more mature so I could help our family situation. And with that question, how important is it? All of our literature really stresses that a family can start recovery before the alcoholic ever starts recovery. The family member can change behavior. And now there's no guarantee that that's going to change anything, but I know for me it brought peace to our house. Because I learned real suddenly that if I didn't engage in arguing, then there was no argument. Now that was something. I mean, things were flying in our house. You know, potatoes were on the ceiling and pizzas were out in the snowbank. And when I stopped doing stuff like that, when I stopped provoking, the pizzas stayed on the table. The mashed potatoes stayed in the pan. And that was like rocket science for me, you know, but it took me going to Al-Anon to learn that. Now, at this day meeting that I went to, there was a woman who was very tall and well-endowed and rather imposing, I would say, and I was always in a hurry to get out the door and get past her. And she always stood at that door. And I knew she wanted to hug me, and I didn't want that to happen. I didn't like the idea of hugging or holding hands, and I thought if she hugged me, I'd disappear in the crease, and, I was out of there. But I swear one day I was trying to get past her, and she kind of turned to the side, and there was no getting past her. There wasn't any doorway left, and she hugged me. And that woman became my sponsor. And she was my sponsor for a long, long time until she passed away in 2010. And who would have thought? Who would have thought? But she taught me a lot of things real quickly. But one of the good things she taught me was we're all in this together. Let's have lunch before the meeting. Let's go up to MHI. Let's go to ASAC. I mean, I was in the car going places with people I didn't know, doing stuff I didn't understand, and when I came home, I felt terrific. And that's the way I think Iowa Al-Anon, and I think also from what I've seen of AA, it is too. People worked together and did stuff, and it was healing. Laughter started to return. People would joke a little bit, or somebody would say something absurd that happened, and somebody would say, yeah, that's happened in my house too, and pretty soon, instead of crying, we're laughing. And so it was catching on. Our Paths to Recovery talks about a sponsor being a loving witness on a spiritual journey, someone who offers perspective. And that's what my sponsor was for me. I mean, I slept on her couch occasionally when I ran away from home. I rode in her car. She saw me in good times and bad, but she never gave me advice. I mean, she made some strong suggestions, but she didn't tell me what to do. She let me learn for myself. A couple of the things I think that she taught me was that I ought to knock it off about my husband's friends. I was very judgmental and critical of them. And I was very curious as to what they were always up to and where they were. And in our One Day at a Time book, it says, knowledge when it's meant to come to you will come with no effort on your part. And she said, honey, she always called me honey, honey, just get busy, you'll get better. And I had my Al-Anon birthday Thursday night at my home group, and I shared it with another person who has 7 years, and she said to me, or she said to the whole group when she was sharing her story, well, when I came here, Judy told me to quit watching sad movies and get into service. And I said, are you sure I said that? That sounded kind of directive, but she goes, yep, I remember it. She said, I was telling you guys I was always sad and I wanted a relationship, and I'd watch these movies and I'd cry. I said, well, stop watching movies. I remember saying that, but service, I think, for me, that really has been the key, and I have her to thank for that. It's very interesting when you stop meddling in somebody else's business, specifically the problem drinker, that person can take action on his or her own behalf. Our One Day at a Time says, stop standing in your own light and the alcoholic's light and God's light. And it was only 11 months after I had been in Al-Anon where my spouse sought help for himself. And I had nothing to do with that. And I thought, what a miracle. The only thing that had happened a little was that I had changed. And our Al-Anon philosophy is that changed attitudes can aid recovery. And that would be mine and somebody else's as well. Shortly after my husband went to treatment, we had dinner at a restaurant. In fact, I asked my friend who came up here with me if the Flamingo restaurant was still in Cedar Rapids after the flood, because we were at the Flamingo that night, and I remember him ordering a drink. And I also, thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous, because one of the suggestions in our Al-Anon pamphlets is to attend all the open meetings of AA that you can. Learn all you can about alcoholism, learn the facts, and forget everything you think you knew and learn again the right way from people who are alcoholics and who are in recovery. And because of my friends, I think in AA, that night I saw that drink. I didn't, have a dramatic awakening or tip the table over or spill a drink or anything like I might have. I just went on and ate my dinner because I knew it wasn't my business. And I had also heard people say things like, this could be common, people have slips. But from that day on at the Flamingo, our lives went in different directions. And it was different, and it was hard to watch somebody slip back gradually into alcoholism. And everything that I ever heard from a recovering alcoholic working a program was true. It's not the caboose that gets somebody. It is that first drink that helps people go down that road, maybe never to come back. And that's his story. But for me, I just continued to do what I always did, which was go to Al-Anon, because I didn't know what to do. I think, what am I going to do? Well, go to a meeting. It's today. Go to another meeting. But I was changing my attitude. I was trying to put down my weapons and pick up the tools. And two of those tools are courtesy and kindness. And those are really two big tools, I think, that help and heal. And I remember my spouse being kind of shocked at me when I started being nicer. He'd look at me like, what's wrong with her? He'd come home real late, and instead of my usual questioning, I would simply say, I'm glad to see you're home. I hope you had a good day. I learned to stop asking questions and make I statements to him. And what that did was keep him home. Because in the past, I would ask all these questions, irritate the heck out of him, and he'd go back out the door. And he would be gone. And I realized that that's what I was afraid of, that he would go out there and be killed. And so I completely changed the way that I spoke to him. But one morning, before I went to work, I heard a big noise out in the yard. And I looked out my watch window, the north window of our house, and there was a transport truck backing up the driveway, and it was kind of a hill, our driveway. And my goodness, I went running out because I thought, this guy's in the wrong place. And on the back of this transport truck was one of those World War II troop carriers, Army ducks like you see in the Dells. And, I looked it up eventually. It's 39 feet long and weighed 13 tons. It was a big thing. Army green, big tires taller than my head. And so the guy jumped out of the cab, and he had his clipboard, and he said, where should I put it? And I had a good thought, but I'm reforming. I don't say that. I just said, I'm sure it's not ours. And he checks the bill of lading, and he said, yeah, it was. He said, I'll park it over here by the forsythia bush. And so he unloaded the duck by the garage, and off he went. I couldn't believe it. I thought, surely there is a mistake. But my spouse came home that night. He came in the house. He was on time. He was thrilled. It came, he said. And it was ours. It was ours. We were the proud owners of a World War II Army duck. And he had found it. He was up in Canada on a fishing trip and rescued it, brought it home to restore it to its original beauty. And the idea was that he and his friends would get it together and repaint it, etc., for that great holiday in Cedar Rapids that it seemed like all the drinkers celebrated, and that's St. Patrick's Day. And it was a project, because now there were more than just a couple people coming to our house on Saturdays. Everybody was turning out, hey, the duck, we hear you got a duck, and that duck was restored to its natural beauty. It even had custom-made stainless steel beer holders in it by a couple guys, and they were all proud. Everybody had their own part in that thing. And as time was building and it was getting close to St. Patrick's Day, my sponsor said to me, honey, your husband's worked very hard on that duck. And she said, I think you should go to the parade. And I had the thought that I should get a new sponsor. But you know how it is with these suggestions. And she said to me, meet me at the corner of Merchants National Bank, get time off, we'll be there at 1 o'clock. And so I did. And probably most of you know what Cedar Rapids looks like on the river and going west to east, the main street there. And I was on the corner, and she said to me, now when the duck gets close, she said, I want you to smile and wave. Well, I could see it coming up the street, and I could see the keg in the back from a great distance, and everybody looked happy. My husband, he's driving like General Patton, and he's proud, and right as the duck was just about at the corner, she gave me the elbow, and so I went as best I could. I don't know if it looked genuine, but I tried. And it was really a priceless moment because he was so stunned to see me out there waving and smiling like everybody else on St. Patrick's Day. He was driving east and looking west, like back at me, like, has she lost her mind? And it was a great day because, not because of his response, but how I actually felt about myself. I felt better that I really was there. I was supportive, like a spouse would be, and the alcoholism was out of the picture. See, I equated that duck with everything alcoholic. Expensive, time-consuming, large, taking him away from me. But that wasn't necessarily so. It was something that he just wanted to do, and it was fun. And we always had trouble on St. Patrick's Day, but that night I was ready to leave for the meeting, and he was just coming home. It was about 20 to 8, I remember, because the clock was right by the door. And when he came in the door, he looked at me and he said, thanks for coming today. It really meant a lot. And I looked at him and I said, what you have taught me in Al-Anon, you're welcome. And that was it. And he said, I know you're going to a meeting tonight, aren't you? I know it makes you feel better. I'm glad. And now that duck, it was a breakthrough on our relationship at home. We had a light at the bottom of our driveway, and when I learned that my husband had alcoholism, a disease, I turned the light on because before I knew what was wrong in our family, I always turned the light off and locked the door. But when I found out, I left the light on for him, and I called it the love light. And I always would say, I'll leave the love light on for you. And I always secretly hoped it would be on for me, but it never was. And eventually how you just kind of give up and you lose hope and you stop looking anymore. But not too long after the duck incident, I came up over the hill one night and I looked down in the cove, and that little light was glowing at the bottom of the driveway. And I knew that he knew I was at a meeting, and it was left intentionally on for me. And from that day on, the love light was always on. Either of us would leave it on for the other person. And if it were burned out, I was always told the bulb was out. It'd soon be replaced. It wasn't personal. But it changed things in our home because of what I learned in Al-Anon. And they were simple yet difficult things. And there was still drinking, and there was not the relationship that I desired. But it was so much better. Now, I knew I was powerless over alcohol. I was trying to restore myself to sanity by doing reasonable things like doing the dishes, keeping the laundry caught up, all those things to make our home life more manageable, and it was better. And I was taking my own inventory, and I realized how jealous I was of all of his friends. And I had all these defects. They were coming up. I could see them, and I had plenty to work on, and not just to focus on him. It was so hard to learn to focus on me because I had become nobody but a watcher of him. And there wasn't much left of me. So I had to put some things into my life. Like I went back to exercise. I actually started reading the newspaper. I just used it for the cat litter box before. All sorts of little things like that. And that was part of my being restored to sanity. And I heard step 3 about making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. But I didn't like God. I figured he dealt me a bad hand. And I liked my group, and I turned myself into my group, But I kind of skipped the whole idea of a higher power and God, and I just went sailing right on to 4 through 10. But about 7 more years, with all of the things remaining the same, I realized that this deal was bigger than anything I could do or anything that I had learned at the meeting and could apply. I had to count somewhere on a higher power to maybe change something in my life, because were we going to be stuck like that forever? And for 1 year, I remember, my spouse was really always opposed to me going to Al-Anon. It made it difficult for me. And the only reason that I accepted that was because our literature tells us that that could be so, because the disease fights to hang on to the disease, and I was getting better. And so if I stayed sick, then he could stay sick. And so it was a real challenge, and it's sometimes maybe harder to get off the merry-go-round than to just stay on and ride. Stay on and ride. But I couldn't turn back. But I said to him, okay, my going to Al-Anon, it bothers you. I don't have to go up to a Waterloo anniversary or whatever. I'll just knock everything off. I won't go anywhere except to meetings, because I came here because of you. And me, I'll get recovery there, but I don't have to be out in public, so to speak. And I kept my commitment for 1 whole year. And you know what? It didn't make a bit of difference in his life. But it made a difference to me because I kept my word. And then I went back into the mainstream of Al-Anon to participate and to be of service, because I had a right to recover as well. And whatever happened for him, I had to turn him over. Now, I didn't know how to start. We have a little book, prayer book, as we understood. And it's spiritual readings. They're not all prayers. But there's a little prayer in there that goes like this. I release my loved one into your care to do with as you will. Just keep me loving him and free from judging him. If he needs changing, God, you'll have to do it. I can't. Just help me to be of service to you and to do my best. And that little prayer on page 214, I read it out loud every day, and I kept reading it to try and turn him over. And one day I came home from a convention, and I found that my belongings had been moved into the back bedroom of our home. But you know, in retrospect, they had been moved back there lovingly, because my One Day at a Time book was set on the nightstand. But I'm back there that night. I really didn't know why I was in the back room of our house. But I have learned in Al-Anon, if you don't know what to say, it's best to say nothing at all until you can think of something that's kind and loving and sensible. And so I just slept in the back room that night. And when I woke up in the morning, I thought about that higher power and that God, and I tried to talk to him, and I said, you know what? Alcohol has been a God in our house for a lot of years, and I don't think that you want me to be sleeping back here. I mean, what am I going to do with my life? Because the 4-step inventory talks about not only inventorying your defects, but inventorying your assets. What are you going to give back? You know, what is your gift to the universe that God endowed you with? And I thought, I think the days of alcohol being the God are done. And it's amazing. Cedar Rapids has a fairly thick section on apartments and rentals. I went to that newspaper, the section. I called one number in that newspaper, and the voice on the other end said, Judy, is that you? God? It was my friend Dottie. She had rental properties. She recognized my voice, and she said, yeah, come on down, come and look at the apartment. I have one for 6 months, and you can have a cat. See, I had cats, and I had a dog, and that appealed to me. She knew that. And so with the help of friends, one friend sitting right here tonight, some friends came out on a Monday morning in May. I hired a truck to take my bed and a few things. The friend sitting there took my plants. My sponsor took my clothes. I left my dog sitting in the Jeep seat looking for a ride. And by noon that day, I was down Lynn Benton Road with dust flying in the back. The only funny thing about that day was I had a friend who was running around my house saying, "You better take this. You're going to be sorry you leave this. Grab this. Take this. You want this." And, I'm just going, no, I'm just gone. And when we went down the road, the trunk was so full that we had to kind of put a rope around it, and dust was flying up. And, we looked like the Okies headed out for a new life. And I never looked back. Sadly, and it wasn't what I wanted, I got a divorce for Christmas. And I called my friend Frank, who was a member of AA, and I had called him before. And he would draw up papers, and then, we'd make up, and he'd put them aside. But that day I said, "Frank, it's Judy." And he said, "You want me to dust off the old papers?" Frank, it is not funny. And so I met Frank, and the two of us just went through the deal, and I had a divorce for Christmas. And I just went on living and going to meetings and doing what I knew how to do. And I kind of wondered, what's going to reveal itself? But my life was good, and so it didn't really matter. And one day my sponsor asked me if I would come to the hospital and stay with her because her mother was dying. And I didn't want to. I wanted to go home, but I went. And she was waiting for her brother to come from Texas. They were going to make the decision to take her mom off life support. And she was kind of cranky because she hadn't been able to get a hold of him. And remember, I said she was this tall, big woman, and I was kind of worried about him. I thought, I've never met him, but I think I better stay till he comes and kind of protect him from her. And he did come, and he sat by me on the couch. And the whole waiting room was full of people from AA, because my sponsor's husband was in AA, and Al-Anon people, and he sits there, and we're kind of crowded in, and he says to me, "How do you know my sister?" Well, I didn't really think it was my place to tell him if he didn't know, so I said, "Well, you ask her." And we chatted a bit and left the hospital after the mother passed away, and I called my sponsor the next day to ask about taking food over to the house. And she said, "Just a minute, my brother wants to speak to you." And I thought, well, what does he want? I was annoyed. I thought he was going to ask me to take care of the poodle while they went to the funeral home, and I don't like that poodle, and I'm way off on this poodle thing. And he says, "I'd like to take you to dinner." Dinner? And I was quiet for a minute. I was thinking, and I said, "Well, I can't, because you see, now I'm in Al-Anon, I have a social life. Stella and I were going for pizza before the meeting on Thursday night, and I said, I can't go." And he was quiet, and I thought, oh, I've hurt his feelings. And, I'm in Al-Anon, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And I said, but maybe tomorrow night I could. And then my sponsor got back on. She goes, "Oh, thank you, honey, just getting him out of my hair. He doesn't know what to do here. He's so uncomfortable with all these people." And so I thought I was doing her a favor. And as it turned out, we had a very nice dinner that night. He asked me about Al-Anon, and he said he didn't know his sister was in Al-Anon, his brother-in-law was in AA. And he said, "And what about these 12 steps?" And so I told him just a little bit, and he said, "Well, I really have a lot to learn from you." I was really impressed with that. So I walked him through the whole 12 steps over dinner, and he had ordered a beer, but I noticed he stopped drinking it. And he went back to Texas. He did call me once, but I didn't pick up the phone. I was kind of scared, and I thought, he's a man. And I kind of thought God was a man, too. So, I was kind of down on God, so thus down on man. And then I thought, that was kind of rude. He was very kind to me. So I called my sponsor. I asked for his address because I knew that I owed him an amends. I had just not been quite as nice as I should have been. Plus, he bought dinner. So I write this little card out, and I went home to visit my parents. And I drove to the post office, and I debated about putting that card in that box. And then eventually I did drop it in, and I thought, oh, I so wanted to get it back because it was just too nice. And went back to Cedar Rapids. In fact, I was standing by my window, the same meeting, the first one I had ever gone to, and it's 10 o'clock on a Friday night. I'd been to St. Ludmilla's, and I'm looking out my little basement window, and I'm looking at the moon, and I'm thinking, life is good. Life is good. I'm happy, and I'm serene. And the phone rang, and it was him. And I thought, oh, no, he got my nice note. So the first thing I said was, did you get my note? He said, no. Did you get mine? I said, well, no. And as it turned out, he wondered if I would like to come to Texas to visit. He said, have you ever been to Texas? And I said, well, no, and why would I want to go there? And he said, well, come visit. And I told him I couldn't really unless I did it right that coming weekend. It was like all or nothing because I was going back to work. And he said, okay, I'll split the ticket with you. And so I had a ticket, and I was going to Houston suddenly. And the funny thing about that was I had planned to go shopping with my sponsor that Saturday, and I suddenly thought, how am I going to tell her that I am not only going to Houston, but I'm going to visit her brother? And well, she was just shocked and horrified, and then she said, honey, I never would have thought of it. You see, I don't think she actually liked her brother very well. And so off I went on this plane to Houston. Now, I'm on the plane thinking, Al-Anon says keep an open mind, and I was open-minded enough to say I would go, but I'm thinking maybe I've overextended myself. And what if I get down there and it's terrible and all this? And I'm kind of fidgeting in my seat, and there's a guy on my left, and I remember I had a magazine called Working Girl, and he kind of pointed at it, and he said, is that you? And I said, Working Girl, and oh, yeah. I said, yeah, and we struck up a little conversation, and I must have dropped a slogan or something, like, easy does it or whatever, and he turned to me and he said, are you a friend of Bill W.'s? And I said, no, but I know his wife. And he was member of AA from Nebraska, and he said, well, where are you going? So I told him, and I said, I'm a little nervous about this. He goes, well, I'll tell you what. He said, when we get to the baggage, I'll stand over there and I'll check him out. And he said, if he looks all right, I'll give you a nod. He was wearing a Stetson, and he was very handsome. I thought, why go to Houston? Let's just keep flying along here. But he was very nice, and he did give me the nod from baggage. And I never actually confessed that to my husband. He is my husband. Until just last year, I told him about that. He goes, really? Someone was spying on me? And I go, yep. But I said it was a program guy, so it was all right. And we had a good conversation, and he brought up something that I had never thought of. He was wondering how he could get his wife to go to Al-Anon. Because he was recovering, he was doing well in the program, and he said she has no interest. And it was exactly the way I felt. The only thing I could say was, well, I tried to get my husband to go to AA, but I didn't have any luck, and I learned that we're powerless over other people, so everybody's got to make their own choices. And we just wished each other well when we got off the plane, and I still remember him fondly because he helped me get over that awful edginess. We had a long-distance relationship for a year and went back to Cedar Rapids and were married. And our wedding was simply a program wedding. My home group from Cedar Rapids, the Thursday night keynoters, just put it together. Sherry got the cake and did the decorations, and a few of my friends served, and my friend Jim sang, and he picked out the songs that he wanted. And I don't tell you about this to let you know that it's like life goes happily ever after and that there was another man in my life. That isn't the point at all. You see, I wasn't looking for a man. I didn't need a man. All I was open to was God's will for me, and I figured the power to carry it out. I had no intention of ever getting married again, and I never really did anything to make it happen. All I did was work my program and cooperate with my higher power. And I've had some really blessed, good years. I moved to Houston, and those of you who know Audrey S., deceased now from Al-Anon, Waterloo, when I got to Houston, Audrey sent me a letter. And it was the letter of the woman that she knew who ran the inner group in Houston. Her name was Betty, I think. And she said, when you get to Houston, you call Betty. And I did it. I opened Audrey's little typewritten note. I called Betty, and I was in a meeting because Texas is a very strange place. I couldn't understand anyone. I was lost. I felt frightened. I was without my support of my Al-Anon people from Iowa. And I didn't want to leave you, but it was a choice, and I went. But I went only because Al-Anon gave me the courage to step out and do something different. I just packed a few things in my car, took a couple clippings off my plants, called AAA, got a map, and I drove from Cedar Rapids to Houston, and I started my new life. I hadn't even moved out of my apartment, and my friend Dottie called me one day, and she said, Judy, I don't think you're coming back. I'm going to rent your apartment if that's okay with you. I mean, I cooperated with Dottie. So there I was, and I lived in Houston for 4 years. I got my job in Houston because I welcomed a newcomer at our meeting, my friendship home group. She asked me what I did, and I told her, and she said, I think we have an opening. Let me check, and I'll call you. And I had an interview on Monday. And the good thing about that was I just hardly had the heart to start over again looking for another job. I was tired. Alcoholism is a tiring deal. But I didn't have to work at finding a new job. It came to me because of Sarita. And ironically, I had the room right next to her where I worked, and her husband was waiting for a liver transplant. And when her buzzer went off that day, I said, sure, I'll cover for you, go. And Ed got a liver transplant, and he's sober in AA, and she's in Al-Anon, and they're still doing the deal. And that was 1994. So when my husband said he'd like to go to Reno, I didn't know what was in Reno. To me, I thought it was the land of hookers and gambling. But once again, I thought I was able to get to Texas. Why not? I have learned in the fellowship to step out a bit and break out of the old patterns and do something different and see what the adventure's all about. And they have been great years in Reno. I found a meeting right away, the one that I could track on the map. It was a little church in Steamboat, just a few miles from my house. Somebody said, I don't want to go to the GR meetings. I always forget. Does anybody want to? And boy, my hand went in the air because I knew that if I went to the meetings, I would meet the people who were making things happen, who were in service, who were having fun, and I would make the connections. So boy, I couldn't wait to get to that district meeting. And then there was a DR there that behaved like Hitler. And I remember that night thinking, this is not like loving Iowa Al-Anon that I'm used to. She was saying, oh, Robert's Rules of Order, out of order, and I'm thinking, this is Al-Anon, isn't it? And I remembered somebody saying, if your people really irritate you, go home and pray for them. And I prayed a lot for her so I could go back. And in all the time that I have been in Nevada, I have been involved in Al-Anon service, and it's been great. Every job I've had, I've loved, and it's broadened my horizons. It's deepened my spiritual life. It's given me friends. Our assembly meets in the middle of Nevada between Las Vegas and Reno, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's called Tonopah, Nevada. It's a bleak little old mining town. We have a little old convention center. I mean, this looks like the Hilton. We have to tie the cord from the screen that's hanging over the swinging kitchen doors to an eye bolt at the bottom of the kitchen door when somebody's not coming through it, and you've got to stand on a chair, and somebody holds the chair, and then you tie the cord down, and then we can use the screen. But we have to use it only when we're not eating. and we have all these little quirks, but it's made us love Tonopah. And we go there twice a year. There's no decision about where to park or where to eat. There's only one Mexican place to eat, so we eat there. And you can park on the dirt. You don't have to worry about sidewalks or anything. And we have a wonderful meeting. We used to meet with AA on the other side of the convention center. We just drew those, kind of rubbery partitions. But they were always accusing us of laughing too much. And we were always accusing them of laughing too much and being too noisy. And truth is, we were both growing. So now we have our assemblies at different times. But I miss them because it was fun to join together and have our banquet. But now we're separate. And I have to tell you, we're not quite as much fun without them. I really think there's sort of a spirit. And that's one thing that I always loved about Iowa Al-Anon, because AA members would come and support the Al-Anon speaker, and it seemed like a togetherness, supportive deal. And that's not true everywhere. Al-Anon can be kind of out in the kitchen or somewhere else. And so I've always loved that about here. In 2008, I served my first year as delegate for Nevada. And my sponsor always said to me, honey, someday you're going to be Nevada's delegate. And I think that's the good thing about people in the program who have a vision for you before you have it for yourself. Because I didn't see some of those things about myself that she saw. And today I remember that, with newcomers especially, to let them know that I enjoyed what they shared at a meeting, that it was a good tool to remember, or that it was positive, or I hear growth in you, because we encourage others. And I think that encouragement and support helped me heal. And so when I was elected that day, she was very sick. She died, like I said, July of 2010. And that night I went back to my room, and I wasn't especially happy for myself. I was just glad to serve. But I was happy to call her and tell her that her dream for me had come true. And I went to Stepping Stones that first year. Our panel, we all went to the home of Bill and Lois. And it was just pretty incredible. I know I have a friend who said, oh, it's just real estate. It is real estate, but it's more than that. It's that little place where we started and where our history began. And Lois's little cluttered desk with all her little mementos and things she never threw away. And Bill's desk up at wit's end, and people were going and putting their feet up on the desk and having their photo taken. And to me, I just thought it's a little bit sacred, I don't think I'm going to sit there at his desk. And my sponsor always had a little saying. She would say, you don't worry about following people. She said, you bring your own shoes. You bring your own shoes. And I had another 3 years of meeting people from around Canada. I learned my Canadian geography because I served as delegate, because the Canadian delegates come too. And I know the difference between Quebec, etc. And somebody's way out there on Atlantic time. And my term is over. It ended in 2010, and I was happy to have it end and have somebody else have the privilege of serving the fellowship. I was probably more excited for my friend to do it than when I did it. But I met some wonderful people there. And when we parted ways, there were 5 of us who said, we want to keep in touch, and let's get a study group going. And so once a month, we call it the Cross Country Study Group. And we call in to a toll-free number, and we share chairing the meeting, and we're going through our Many Voices One Journey. We talk about the questions and answers, and then we have 15 minutes of personal drivel at the end. And we catch up with our lives and talk to each other. And I'm a service sponsor for one of those people. And I'd never been to Maine before, and I had the fun of going to Maine and seeing my friend again. And all because of Al-Anon And it's given me the courage to like step out, to have new experiences, to do things. I just can't, and I don't have to say what it's like, because I have a friend who says, for those who understand, no explanation is necessary. For those who don't, none is possible. And I think if you're here tonight, you probably have experienced the help and friendship like I have. I have a ready-made family. I had no children. That had been a decision of my own. And when I married my husband, his wife had died, and he had 2 adult sons. And the one son is married, and the other is not. I guess I would say he has an alternate lifestyle, and I think I'm the perfect person to be in that family, because when we first went to visit the oldest son and his wife, my husband said to me, "We're going to have to stop and get some groceries. There isn't too much food in the house." And that, to me, I knew right away what he meant. I figured there would probably be quite a bit of beer, but nothing solid. And that's kind of what I saw. And so I have learned to detach with love. We keep our schedules. We show up. We support the things that are good. I've learned to set boundaries. I don't go out on the boat for an overnight, because boating rhymes with beer, practically. And I just protect myself from those things that give me flashbacks. I still don't like the sound of an aluminum can falling out of a car and hitting the concrete. It brings back bad memories. But I have a little granddaughter, and that's pretty amazing. When she's with me, people say, "You two look just alike." And I just smile. I mean, what does it matter? You're my family. And I wasn't born into your family, but I feel that we are family. And so I have a good life. And the youngest son, the first time that he knew I was in his house, he went up the back stairs and went into his bedroom. He wasn't interested in having me in his life. But I just kept going the Al-Anon way, which is give people space and let it be. And that kid today calls, and always when he hangs up says he loves me. And I call and I check on him and see how he's doing. I came to Al-Anon searching for answers to alcoholism, but I have gained much more than that, thanks to the steps and the traditions and the concepts. Those concepts were Greek to me when I got here, but now they speak to me about leadership, double-headed management, all sorts of things, and I apply those principles in my life. Some of the people that started Al-Anon with me are no longer here, and I realize too that my days are limited. But Al-Anon has taught me to seize every day and not to be discouraged if it seems like you're at the end of the road, because tomorrow is a new day. And just when you think it's over, it's not over. There's something good around the corner. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to have shared this time with you, and I'm sure that you want to dance and have fun, and look forward to Larry talking tomorrow. I've heard Larry share before, and I know you're in for a treat. So thank you, Waterloo. Thank you, Al-Anon. Thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous.